Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar organized by Twinning Europe. My name is Marta, and I am very, very happy to be your host for today. Before we start, just a practical information for the participants. The webinar is recorded, and the recording might be used for dissemination purposes. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we will try to address all of them towards the end of this webinar. But without further delay, let's go to the heart of today's event. The objective of this presentation is to provide a solid theoretical and practical basis for teachers to better understand the opportunities and challenges of recognition system, both at the classroom level and at the level of teachers' professional development. We will go together from the history of these systems to the way in which we could implement them in our context, while questioning their possible future deployments at different levels. But without further I would like now to give the floor to our guest speaker today, Luis Galindo from the Research and Development Department Arezzo Canope. Luis, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marta, and hi, everybody. So probably I will start by sharing my screen. So let me share my screen. Let me just 1 minute. Perfect. I'll share my whole screen like that. I can show you a video. Let's start. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Perfect. Great. So the idea, as Marta said today, is to talk a little bit about theory, but also practice when talking about open badges and micro-credentials, and also making the difference of both and how we can work with this recognition artifacts that I prefer to call it recognition artifacts because we can adapt them to different kind of situations, and we will see how we can adapt this recognition artifacts to different kind of contexts and to different kind of situations to answer different kind of challenges. But first, let me introduce myself. As Marta just said, I work at the R&D department at Réseau Canopé, that is an operator from the Ministry of Education in France. But also, I'm a researcher, an associate researcher at the Technical Laboratory at the University of Poitiers, and I work with the learning analytics context, we will say, on the Master Smart Tech at the University of Côte d'Azur. So I work with different kind of subjects, micro-credentials, because you will see at the end how micro-credentials are related with learning analytics, because it allows us also to better understand what we are doing and how we are doing different kind of things. So that's why we connect different kind of points, we will say. So let me start with a subject that is not exactly related with micro-credentials and open badges. I don't know if you know the work of Carol Dweck around the growing mindset. Carol Dweck is a researcher in psychology at the University of Stanford, and actually I will simplify and resume what she did. She divided into our mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growing mindset. A fixed mindset, you have some examples at your left. Either I'm good at it or not, or I'm not. That's just who I am, and I can change it. If you have to work hard, you don't have ability. If I don't try, then I won't fail. The job position is totally out of my league if I'm working on the professional world, etc., etc., etc. So from the beginning, when we are children, and also when we are adult, we have this fixed mindset around of us. So I'm trying to simplify the idea because it's not a presentation around the subject of the growing mindset. In the other side of the screen at your right, you have the opposite. So I can learn to do anything I want. I'm a constantly,
Louis,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you maybe just adjust a bit the camera because we can
Sorry.
see you only exactly. That's perfect. Okay,
Great.
now it's
Because I
much
cannot
better.
see
Thank
my
you.
camera right now.
Okay, now
Thank
it's
you.
much better. Thank you.
Perfect. So at the right, you have exactly the opposite. So I can learn to do anything I want. I'm a constantly evolving work in progress. The more you challenge yourself, the smarter you become. I only fail when I stop trying. The job position looks challenging. Let's apply for it. So the idea is not to concentrate my efforts on the output, but on the process of this output, on the effort to achieve this output. And I like to make this analogy with traditional ways of recognizing learning and recognizing or different professional paths. It will depend on the context. It's not a bad and a good thing. It's just a different thing and it's a complementary thing. So when we talk about diplomas and certificates, once we reach our goal, the degree or the certificate, that's it actually. When you have your goal is to achieve this diploma or this certificate, and when you are there, it's finished actually. But sometimes learning doesn't work like that because probably you will be interested in other kind of subjects, in other kind of things, etc., etc. But sometimes these interesting things that you are developing are not recognized, and that's the interesting thing. And the other kind of remark around diplomas and certificates in this fixed recognition artifact is the focus on that the focus is on the degree or certificate as well as on the skills and the knowledge itself, because you concentrate everything more on the knowledge, more on the skills that you are developing. And you will see that in a dynamic recognition artifact, we continue to add skills and knowledge to our learning journey. We learn in collaboration with others. As I said before, once you arrive, it's like a Lego actually. When you have your diploma, we will say you will have the base of your house, but then you will continue to add Lego pieces actually to your house. And probably you will never finish to add Lego pieces to your town, to your city, or to your house. And that's the interesting thing of a dynamic recognition artifact, because I can add all the time these pieces to my knowledge, to my path, to my learning journey. And in the same place, the focus is not on the skills and the knowledge itself. The focus is on what I can do with my skills and knowledge. So if I can give you an example, and we see this example a lot also with dynamic recognition artifacts because we are used to do it like that. Sometimes we have a recognition artifact around the skill of creativity, for example, but not about what I can do with my creativity, with the development of my creativity. And that is interesting to think when we are thinking about a recognition artifact. And when we talk about recognition artifacts, actually it's nothing new, and you will see a story about this, and the story will be very interesting because we will see the origins of all of this. So the story begins in 1991. I don't know if if some of you are from France, but you will probably recognize this philosopher that is in the picture, that is Michel Serres. And actually, in 1991, Michel Serres received a letter from the prime minister saying that a lot of skills and knowledge are evolving in our society, and we have to update actually the way we recognize these skills and this development and all of this that it was happening in 1991. We are talking about more than 30 years ago, because we asked the same questions a little bit today. So Michel Serres started to work with two other researchers, with Michel Autier and Pierre Lévy, and they imagined something that was called the knowledge trees. And actually, they built it as software in 1991 or 1992 about to develop this idea of the knowledge trees. But at this time, and if you see the software of the knowledge trees, it was a software that it was from the 90s. There was not the technology to support the interesting idea of the knowledge trees. And I will give you a summary of what the idea was about. So the idea was to have a different kind of certificates that integrate skills that I can transfer to another person. So in each certificate, or in each piece of that we call it a certificate, we had a title, we have a part that say what I know, another part that said why I explain how I use what I know, and in the other part, and this part that will connect us with another people, with other peers, I propose a test, an exercise allowing other learners to evaluate what I know and how I use what I know, to transfer this to another person. And it is exactly like that that I will start to build the tree, we will say, with something that was called a blazon. And a blazon was a collection of different kind of certificates, because a lot of things that I know and that I use and how I use these things that I know are connected. And that's very interesting, because all of these connections, all of these certificates form that what they call it the blazon. And actually, the different certificates and the different blazons started to build a tree. But what is interesting about this idea is that we can have a tree of an individual, because I can have, for example, my tree, as I said before, with the Lego, with this base, and then all of the knowledge, all of the skills that I'm building in my own tree. But I can also represent, or I can also map the tree of a community, the tree of a group. And that's another interesting and very powerful idea that was developed in 1991. So as I say before, you can have your individual tree like this tree. Like this tree that is right here of this person. So knowledge is represented in the form of knowledge objects, which when grouped together form specific skills. These groups of knowledge objects constituting competencies correspond to the blazons. And like that, I can start to build my individual knowledge tree. But I can also build, as I said before, build my collective tree. So in the knowledge tree, the members of the group can individually hold a part of the knowledge, while the group can, taking into account the knowledge held by each member, hold a blazon, thus a given skill. And like that, I can start to map also the knowledge and the skills of a group, of a community. And that's an interesting balance between the individual recognition and the recognition at the collective level. So we're going to travel from 1991 and this very interesting idea of Michel Serres, Pierre Levy, and Michel Autier. And we will travel like more than 20 years from this idea to Canada, actually. And it was July 22, 2010 in Canada. And I don't know if you know this event that is the Mozilla Fest event, where different kind of developers meet together in one city, in one place, and start to share actually what they developed around the Mozilla community, that developed the Firefox uh, navigator. So the idea of these events was to share knowledge, to share skills, to build together, and all of that. And in this event, it was one person that started to say, it's interesting because we don't recognize what we are sharing, what we are developing, and what we are doing in the Mozilla community. And she started to imagine a link with the badges for scouts. But this idea is very old, and depending on the context, can have different variations. As I said before, the idea that inspired this person and the blog that he published in 2010 for the open badges idea is the badges for scouts. But we can also have medals for athletes or soldiers, for example, awards for gamers, etc., etc. The problem he saw, and that's the interesting part of what he developed, is that in all of these scenarios, recognition for an individual comes always from a central entity representing the group. So in all of the examples here, there is always a central entity that will deliver actually the recognition. So he was asking himself, what if there was no central committee charged with inventing these objects of recognition and overseeing their distribution? What if using the same technologies and philosophies of the open web, the community could be empowered to create objects of recognition and distribute them to one another? So the idea was an horizontal idea, how I can recognize and how I can build a technology, how I can build a system that will recognize in a horizontal way. So we will not have this central entity there. And he invented, or with the community, of course, they invented the specification of the open badges, actually. And what is an open badge specifically? So it is not and that's why sometimes I have a problem with the badge analogy, because it's not just the image. It's more than that, because you have the image, and behind the image, you have a lot of interesting things for the recognition system. So an open badge technically is an image, and behind the image, you have something that we call the metadata. And in the process of the system, you can have different kind of actors. You can have the sender, that it could be an institution or a person. You can have the receiver that will receive this badge, that it could be an institution or a person. And another interesting thing, that you can have an endorser. An endorser could be a person that testify that this was that the development of this skill was very interesting, and also could be an institution or a person. And in the metadata that is behind the image, you can have different kind of information that is very dynamic. And that's the powerful and dynamic thing of the technology. Because you can have the knowledge and the skills that were developed, you can have a duration and a validity. So the evaluation that is very interesting when you submit projects, when you submit something to validate the acquisition of this badge, and this acquisition could have a duration. Another thing that is important is that the badge is verifiable, is shareable, and accessible everywhere. So a badge, and I will show you later, you can keep your badges in a place, but you can keep it in different kind of places. And that's the important thing of the specification of open badges, that can allow us to share the badges in different platforms, in different places, etc., etc. And I will show you a specific example of that, so it will be much more clear all of this definition. And finally, you have the evidence and the criteria to acquire this badge. And that's very, 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 very important, actually, the evidence and the criteria and how you can design this. And I will show you some insights on how we can design this from a practical point of view. So we started different experimentations, we started to put in place different kind of things, and we observed different kind of things, different kind of challenges, different kind of problems, and also different kind of opportunities. So the first thing that I observed, it was that there's two ways to use open badges. In universities, because universities have begun to rely on the technology that powers open badges to use what is called micro certifications or micro credentials. And that's why we are talking in this presentation about open badges and also about micro certifications or micro credentials. And you will see the difference that we are trying to put in place between both of them, but both of them use the same technology. The second way to use open badges is more related to the original idea, because in the first idea, universities, the central entity, will distribute these micro-credentials. In other contexts, always is a central entity that will distribute these micro-certifications or micro-credentials. But in the second way to use open badges is more related to the original idea around open badges, because the recognition of what normally is not recognized, it comes from peers, actually. And that's why we started to talk about informal learning, for example. When we learn something in an informal context, all of this learning process is not recognized. And actually, with open badges, we started to recognize these kind of things. But we also observed some problems that we have identified when using open badges. For example, if our goal is medium or long-term recognition in a few hours or days, this system has a hard time working because the open badge is in the most cases not used by the recipient, and the value disappears after a few hours or minutes, sometimes days probably, but it will disappear in a short period of time. So this system could be useful for an event like the Mozilla Community Event. I recognize you this, and that. I also organized events in the e-twinning context, for example. So it was very interesting because in the context of the event, it was very interesting, this peer-to-peer recognition. But it will be very difficult to give value to these badges after the event. And that's the main challenge of this part of this first problem around the open badges that we encountered. Another problem that we observed is that when you try to use open badges to recognize skills, everything becomes a little bit more complicated because we don't have a lot of coherence around this kind of recognition. Do you recognize the skill itself? What I am able to do with that skill? And again, this causes the recognition artifact, in this case the open badge, to lose its value. So it's very interesting to put in our heads these two challenges when we are designing the open badges experience. And then when we talk about micro certifications of micro credentials, we have a little bit the same problem because we don't have a definition around micro certifications and micro credentials. So we are trying country by country to try to define what is an open badge, when we can use it, and what is a micro certification and when we can use it. And in the European Commission context, we have a definition by the European Commission. So according to the European Commission, they may be defined as certified, open, flexible, and short-term models of courses, and they are particularly useful for people who want to upskill or reskill to meet labor market needs. So we are talking more in the professional market, but you will see that we can use this kind of artifacts in different kind of contexts. And what is interesting, you can use this kind of artifact in a very small context or in a very large context. And I will show you some examples about this. So they may be categorized as being something more than an individual course, but smaller than a full degree. So it's like in the middle, and we can integrate these micro credentials in the path, in the learning path, to achieve some different goals that are clearly defined. And that's very, very powerful too. Australia defined micro credentials in a very similar way. Canada do it the same way. The United States do it in the same way. So that's interesting. We start to build a framework to try to talk together and try to have a coherence around this kind of topics and around this kind of technologies. So for me, the open badges technology is there because it's the same technology as I said before. The open badges, micro credentials, the same technology. But they need to build a system but we need to build a system to make it work in different contexts. So I think that what is missing is this system to make it works. Actually, you have a very powerful technology that is what our colleagues in the Mozilla from the Mozilla Foundation invented, but now and now is another organization that is taking the specification. But now we have to define a system, and that's exactly what we try to experiment to do. So to try to define a system, we asked ourselves that there was not so many coherence actually when we defined the open badges or the micro certifications, because sometimes we're talking about creativity. So the badge creativity, for example. But the badge creativity, you can have it if you see a conference about creativity, you can have it if you go to a workshop about creativity, if you work on a project about creativity, but it's not the same thing. So it is a little bit complicated to have this coherence. So we tried to define a system to help us to design an open badges or a micro credentials collection and to have coherence when working with different kind of publics in different kind of contexts. So in this system, we try to define 4 different elements. The first element is the collection. So the collection could be a general thing. For example, I want to learn artificial intelligence. So my collection of badges will be artificial intelligence. But inside this big subject that is artificial intelligence, I will have different kind of themes. So the second element will be the different themes that will enter inside of the collection. In the example of the artificial intelligence, could be the different branches, for example, of artificial intelligence, and I could divide the branches on different teams. And when working in each theme, I can make different kind of actions. So that's the third part of this system that we try to experiment. An action could be anything, as I said before. You can participate in something, you can collaborate with someone, you can join something or some initiative, you can realize something, you can know something, and you can succeed with us with something. For example, putting in place a project that then you can integrate in the metadata of your open badge. And finally, we can have a posture, because we will have some people like to talk about this as a level. Uh, we have a lot of debate about talking as a level or not, and you will see I think there's no answer for this, but a lot of people like to talk more of a posture than a level. But I think that it will depend on your context and it will depend on your objective when you are putting in place an experience with an open badges technology. So we defined it for example, 4 different postures: an explorer, an actor, an expert, and an architect. And actually, a badge, as I said before, had different kind of elements in the metadata of the badge. We have all the criteria or the evaluation, all the evidence, for example, all the projects that you developed that you are putting there, but you also have an image presentation. So we wanted to put this for elements, we wanted to put this for elements in the image so we can recognize very fast in our context the different elements. Where is the collection? Where is the theme? Where is the action? Where is the posture, etc., etc. And we put it, for example, this image that we will say that is a badge. The collection here, the theme right here, the action right here, and the posture right here. And like that, I know that I will recognize that the posture, explorer, actor, or architect, it will be here. I know that the action, participate, realize something, build something, it will be here. The theme will be here and the collection will be here. So I can recognize the system more easily and I can retrieve myself in the collection that we are putting in place in a community, in a context, etc., etc. And we're talking about a context, you can have, we will talk later a little bit more about the context, but you can have different kind of context. You can have a school as a context. If you're a teacher, your context could be just your classroom, and it will be great actually because you can put in place some things very quickly as a teacher with your classroom, and you will be the designer of the Open Badges experience. But you can put things in a collaboration from different schools, for example, in a community like the e-training community, for example, in a European thing, etc., etc., etc. So I will show you some examples about this. And you can work with different kind of publics. You can work with kids, or you can work with students in the university. You can work with adults that will access work. You can work with teachers for recognition, professional development. And you need to very well define actually the terms and all of that. For example, in France, we started to work about with open badges. So we call open badges when we work with with high school students or with primary students. Don't ask me why we talking about this when working with students, and micro credentials when working with teachers. So we try to make the difference, having different definitions for both of them, because our context actually asks this kind of need. So it's interesting to well define the terms in function of your context. So here's an example of how visually you can recognize the collection, the themes, and the action. So in this collection, we have 4 different themes. Each theme will have an action, and each action will have a posture. And like that, we can map very easily a badge, because this is one badge, this is another badge, this is another badge, and this is another badge. Sorry, we have 8 badges actually here. This is one badge, this is one badge, this is one badge, and this is one badge. Actually, each green part will be a badge, and like that I can color the badge in the different ways. I will show a concrete example about this later. So to design this, we tried to make it with an Excel file, actually, to simplify the things. So I was working with different colleagues working on different kind of subjects because they wanted to imagine the collection about inclusion, the connection about educational robotics, the collection about code, learning to code, the collection about Fab Labs, the collection about active learning, etc., etc., etc. So what I did, I gave them all of this tools, we'll say, to design the badges. And actually, the first part, this 4 colors, we'll say, is the image of the badge. And this other part that is in white is the metadata of the badge. So here you will design, you will imagine a collection. One collection can have different kind of themes. Each theme will be associated with an action, and each action will be associated with a posture. And each of this will give me, as I show you here, one badge. But actually, in each badge that you will define, you have to define all of this. You have to imagine the description of the badge. What it will be the description of the badge, so I can find very clearly what is this badge about and why I will use it or not. The criteria to have this badge. So how I need to send a project, I need to do this, I will be evaluating this kind of skills, etc., etc. And what is interesting that in the criteria, some of the platforms that I will show you later allows you to make the link with framework of competences, like the DigiComp framework, for example, in Europe, etc., etc., the UNESCO framework, etc., etc. So it's an interesting thing. Some people use it, some people don't use it. It will depend, one more time, on the context, on the objective of the experience. Another interesting part is the production. What I have to produce to have this badge. Do I need to send a project? Do I need to set to fill an evaluation? Do I need to complete a path, etc., etc.? What is interesting with the badge is that it's very dynamic. Once I have the badge, I can continue to add projects on the badge. And that's the interesting thing, or probably the most interesting thing, because it's more interesting to have a strong badge that has a lot of information there, that has a lot of projects inside, that is well endorsed, etc., etc., than a lot of little badges over there. And that's another interesting to think when you are thinking about your public and when you are thinking about your context. The last part is who can deliver the recognition, who can endorse this recognition, who can receive this recognition. And if I give you an example, when we defined the educational robotics collection, we asked the people that is working on this subject, some researchers in France, the INRIA, some other researchers from different universities that were working on this subject, etc., etc. And that's very powerful because you start to create a community, and that's very interesting. And that's very challenging also to constitute the community that is behind each collection. So here's an example of the robotic educational robotics. So the collection, it was educational robotics, and you can have different kind of themes. So our colleagues defined the visual programming theme, the textual programming theme, when you have to train something theme, the creative usages of robotic educational robotic theme, etc., etc. And if you see in each branch, you have the action. Here is participate, here is know, here is success. I think it's a project. And in each action, you will have, they call it the level or the posture, expert, actor, architect, and all of that. And like that, you can map a path. You can map like a learning path. And for example, another interesting thing is that you can have meta badges or key badges. For example, these three here, or when you have the architect, will give you just one badge here. And like that, you will reduce the quantity of badges that you can have, and you can start to design a learning path around that. And that's interesting when you're working in a classroom with kids, because they can visualize very clearly my learning path. But that's also interesting in the workplace, because I can match skills in my professional development with what is waiting in the workplace, actually. So that's very, very powerful in probably all of the contexts, kids, adults, etc., etc. And here's an example of this. This was created for teachers, actually, because that's why they are a little bit ugly, actually, the images, because it was for teachers. We were not so interested in the images, but we created what I say before. You see, what I didn't like of this, but probably there is a justification of this. They use it, the levels, as medals, as you can note right here. You see that this is the silver medal and the gold medal. I didn't like too much because that makes us think about medals, and actually badges is the opposite of that, because you can have the metadata, you can build communities and all of that. But they told me that what is interesting is that to identify with what I know. So very fast I can identify, this is, oh, this is the architect, oh, this is the expert, actually, because of the color, because I'm used to work with these colors. It was a debate, and that depends, I think, one more time, of your context and the problem that you are trying to achieve. But this was for adults, so sometimes it will take the form of a micro certification, where I can also find the different elements that I showed you before, the posture, the collection, the theme, etc., in the micro certification. I will show you an example of this later when we will see the platforms. And on the other side, this project was for kids. So for kids, this doesn't work it actually, because kids wanted to work together. And this example is very interesting because kids could follow different paths. Here we have four different paths. But if I'm interested on this path, we'll say the engineer path, because this what was for to learn in data literacy with kids. I can follow this literacy path, and I will be expert on this path. And then I can teach another kid about this path because I have this badge around this specific topic. But if I'm in visualization, I can specialize in this, and like that, we can learn from peers, actually, because you can help me on this project because we have been in this project, and we need somebody that knows how to visualize perfect, and I will show you how you can visualize, and probably you will have the badge, and actually it will be the peer that will give the badge. So they created a very, very interesting format, we will say. And if you need that everybody acquire all of the skills, we have the last badge that it was the key badge that we give to kids. And as you see here, the design was very bad actually, because we wanted some an artifact that will be nice also for students. So if you see the eyes right here, it's an interesting thing because they put a QR code behind the badges that they printed. And in the eyes, we could put a code actually, like that I can identify when we are working in the classroom, who is who actually to help me to work on this project, etc., etc. So this is very powerful. This allows us to collaborate in a different way. So I think it was a very creative way of putting in place open badges. They were kids, so they were not interested in professional development and all of that. So it was interesting to work this way. So they printed actually the badge, and they put the QR code behind the badge, so they could put the project that they were developing around data literacy on the platform, the online platform. But the most important objective on this example, it was the interaction of the classroom. That it was not the case here actually. So all that will depend on the objective that you have and on the ecosystem in which you are working. Here, the ecosystem was just the classroom. Here, the ecosystem is much bigger. And now we are talking about ecosystems that will be in a region, for example. There is a project in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region in France that are trying to put in place something that will connect companies, schools, universities, uh, research places, etc., etc. So it's a very ambitious project, and it's a very macro level. This is more a micro level, but you see how you can work with a lot of flexibility in different kind of frameworks. So we were talking about a more technical point of view, how you can put in place actually these kind of systems. Now we probably, if we put in our heads the different elements, I know how to design the system. I can have something with collections, themes, and actions and postures. Great, I will have my collection, and it's very difficult to do this process. And what I would like to do is to design the collection with the users. We found that it's very important to design the collection with the users, because like that you will answer to the needs of the users. If the users are teachers, let design the micro credentials with teachers. If the users are kids, let design the badges process or experience with the kids, etc., etc. And it's very powerful. And actually, this part is very easy. Now you will see that it's very straightforward, the technical part. The most difficult part is your creativity to put in place an open badges or a micro credentials learning experience. So here you need two things, we will say, to send and receive a badge: a platform or a system that will send the badge or the micro credential, and another one where you can stock the different badges. So you have different options. Badger here is a company from the United States that it originally was Mozilla actually that is behind Badger. And actually there is just one platform to receive and to send the badges. It's just their one platform. Another one, and it is a company from Finland, is Open Badge Factory. And Open Badge Factory has two platforms: one to send the badges, mostly for institutions, and the other one to receive the badges. That is the Open Badge Passport, where I will stock all my badges, I will show the badges, I will connect with other people that has these badges, I will discover new badges, etc., etc. Both of them have the inconvenience and advantages, we can say, and both of them had interesting things. For example, Badger at the beginning put it in place a pathway that it was very interesting to visualize your learning experience. Now Open Badge Passport, I think it's 3 months ago, they have this possibility. Open Badge Passport now have the possibility, you have the possibility to send also badges and all of that. So both have interesting things. Another interesting thing of Open Badge Passport is that you can create spaces. For example, a space for your ecosystem. Your ecosystem is school, great. You have the space for your ecosystem. Your ecosystem is your classroom, great. You have your space there. And another interesting thing of where you can stock the badges is that badges are portable. You receive the badge and it's up to you to put it in Open Badge Passport, Badger, LinkedIn, or in any platform, Moodle, any platform. And that's the powerful thing. The specification can work anywhere, actually. So you can For example, if we develop something in the e-twinning platform, you can put it there without any problem. So that's an interesting and powerful functionality of the specification. And as I say before, we recognize it, and we the Indiana University in a study illustrate 4 groups of principles around designing an open batch ecosystem to try to concentrate on different kind of challenges. The first one, as I said before, is the recognition of informal learning. And actually, most open badges experiences were around this topic of informal learning, what is not recognized, how we can recognize what is not recognized, but also in the evaluation today of formal learning. And we can see an explosion of micro credentials of different experiences, very interesting experiences with universities and with other actors of the training ecosystem around formal learning. And it's interesting when you connect both informal and formal learning. And also with to motivation to learn. Take as an example what I showed you just before with all of these badges, very nice badges for the data literacy project that my colleagues developed. The objective of this project, it was how we can motivate students to learn. And that's the third one, the third principle that our colleagues from the University of Indiana put it here. And the last one is the importance of the open badges ecosystems. Think about your ecosystem. Think about the people that will be behind your ecosystem, the users, how they will use it, how will they share it, how they will interact. And this is very, very important when you are designing an open batch learning experience. So let me show you very fast the technical part of this. So here's Open Batch Passport, as I said before, is very straightforward. When you receive a badge, you can accept it or you can decline it. So you are not you don't have to show your badge by default. It's up to you to show your badge. And you see the options are very simple. You can import a badge and you can export a badge. You can export it to put it in another platform. And the specification will be verifiable, so we can verify that the badge is original. And I will talk to you a little bit later about this because we are working also at the European level with the blockchain to make something that the badge or the micro certification that you receive, you can put it in your pocket or in a wallet or in a e-wallet, we will call it. And you can have different e-wallets in Europe, and I will show you a video about that it will illustrate this idea much more better. And you can have different possibilities. Here is the possibility of, I say before, the spaces. You can have different kind of spaces for your ecosystem. Or you can also have the minimaps. You see the path, the learning path. This is very interesting, a very interesting functionality that they put it in place to visualize the different path that I can follow with the badges. And you see different examples here of the paths there. The other platform is the American platform, Badger, and it's very similar. To add a badge, you click here and you add your badge. If you want to send your badge, you create an issuer right here, and you send badges. You create badges and you send badges. And it's very, very straightforward also. You put the criteria there, etc., etc. Some people say that Badger, that Open Batch Passport is more user-friendly. I think you have to test both platforms and you can decide. And they also have this idea of pathways. So you can follow a pathway and you can have the meta badge or the key badge or the meta certification or the bigger micro certification at the end, or you can have a certification also at the end. And that's what is interesting from Badger is that they started to work of this idea of open badges and micro credentials, so more like a credential. And you see, they have this format of a certificate with the QR code right here, so you can deliver some certificates and you can have this flexibility with the power of the technology behind this idea. So for example, here you have the image, is like the badge images, and behind this image you have all the metadata that you can access through the QR code right here, and you can verify that all of this information is original, it was not modified, etc., etc. So that's a very interesting thing over there. So let me show you a video about this because this verifiable part is very, very important too. So in this video, it's a project, a European project that is still a work in progress. I don't know what at the end will be this project, but I think that the idea that is behind this project is very, very powerful if we want to create a European network to work together, if we want to connect teachers from different countries, if we want to connect students with different countries, if we want a lifelong learning path from a student to a teacher, for example, I think the idea is very powerful. So let me show you this video, 2-minute video, and then I will show you some last insights, and then we can exchange a little bit more.
I think we cannot hear the sound.
Ah,
Can you maybe try to reshare
I will
the
reshare
screen,
the screen.
including the computer sound? Yeah, let's try this
Okay.
way.
Let me, let me see. Let me see if it's working.
They are digital.
Okay, now it works. Yeah, we
Great. So
can
I'll
hear
put
it.
it
Yeah,
again the video.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you very much.
Documents will become digital. This will facilitate citizens and businesses access to important information, especially in some cross-border contexts. But digitizing documents is the easy part. The challenge is to transition from traditional to digital checks that we can trust. Verifiable credentials offer a new pattern for exchanging information that is distributed and decentralized, where blockchain acts as a single point of truth. They are digital versions of physical credentials, tamper-proof and cryptographically verifiable, that associate with three other key concepts: the decentralized identifier, or DID, a unique identifier without the need for a central registration authority; immutable, respecting privacy, and cryptographically verifiable; the VC lifecycle, a common reference model which enables standardization and scalable implementation; and the digital wallets, as almost all users' interactions to exchange verifiable credentials depend on them. Take Eva's example. After getting a bachelor's degree, she successfully completed her computer engineering master's degree in Greece. In order to apply for a job, Eva needs to have her master's diploma verified to get her license practice. But how does it all work? To start, Eva needs an official verifiable ID. She uses it to authenticate to the university's network portal to request the issuance of her diploma. With the diploma stored on her personal digital wallet, Eva then accesses the Institute for Accreditation of Engineers app, where she has to provide it, so they grant her the license to practice credential. The Institute for Accreditation then verifies the diploma and issues her license to practice credential. With all her credentials stored in her digital wallet, Eva can easily share it with her employer so they can verify its authenticity. With verifiable credentials, EBSI is providing a new way for public administrations to issue documents, a new way for citizens to manage their documents, and a new way for an entire ecosystem to verify them. Ultimately, EBSI is designing a new way to create value and trust.
So as you see in the idea, they talk about, let me just reshare my screen, not my screen, my presentation. FC was talking about not micro-credentials, but actually there is a company that is behind there that is very, very micro-credential focused, and it's BC Diploma actually. So the idea behind this, I think, is very powerful. And as you can see, we can work in the context of professional training. The challenge of working in the professional training of teachers is that each country has a different system for training. So that's the first challenge that we are trying to not to solve, because I think it's not at our level, it's more politically to solve this kind of level. But I think that at our level, we can start to put the things, the frameworks, so the mechanisms, the systems, to try to have one frame or one European framework. And at the same time, I was talking about the teacher professional development, but at the same time, we can work on the lifelong learning path, because we can work, as I said before, in an ecosystem just with students in a classroom, just in a collaboration with different schools, or in the country, actually. In France, we have one project that illustrates this. Everything started in a classroom. It was one teacher that wanted to work with badges in the classroom. Then the other teachers just started to say, oh, that's interesting, actually. Probably we can collaborate and make something together. And then it was the school. And it was very interesting. The kids presented us what they designed, and it was very, very interesting because kids could collaborate, could work peer to peer, etc., etc. And then they started to work with another school in Bordeaux. And so it was two schools that started to collaborate. But you see, it's very important to start small. Sometimes we want to start very big, like say, we're going to put a platform for the whole region. And I will not mention the regions. So sometimes this doesn't work it actually, because all actors were in their silos, and so it doesn't work it, because sometimes we want to start very big. And I think we have to start small, try to test different kind of things, see what is working. And one more time, one important thing is to work with the users. So here are some important points to remember to finish the presentation. One interesting thing is the recognition of the learning experience, as I illustrated here all the time, actually. With the artifact, with the recognition artifact, the badge, or the micro-credential, we can recognize the learning experiences, different learning experiences, formal, informal, for motivation, etc., etc. But what is very powerful is to trace what happens after the learning experience is over. How do we use the recognition artifact to trace how learners mobilize different elements of the learning experience? How did they use the new knowledge and skills developed during the learning experience? What I'm saying with this is that it's interesting, once I receive my artifact, my recognition artifact, my badge, my micro credential, it's interesting to observe if I'm still putting inside projects in the metadata. So I still to develop my knowledge, my skills, my projects, and I still to apply what I know with, or I learned it actually. And that's very, very interesting. The after the training session, the after the learning experience. So in a recognition system, the goal is not only to rely on the what, mastering the resources by getting the right or wrong answer. Today, most of the experiences are around this, the what, but also on the how the learner understands the process and the resources. More importantly, if coupled with a sufficiently flexible recognition artifact, we can start to detect different patterns to interpret what the learner wants to achieve and produce a personalized learning experience to help them get there. So that's very important, I think. And that's why I'm trying to work with the analytics part and the open badges technology that is with my that it is used also in micro certifications. So another, I talk a lot about this point, and is the importance of the context. So always try to design the recognition artifact experience with the beneficiaries to best meet their needs. In this way, beneficiaries will use the artifacts, because in most cases, the artifacts are not used. And actually, we try to observe what is happening. And most of the time, it's difficult to create a community to try to make them use the artifact, to put more projects inside, etc., etc. Especially in big projects, in macro projects. And the last point is the community. So the last important aspect is identified is the importance of building a community of learners through recognition of their learning experience. If there's no a community, there's no ecosystem. And that's the huge challenge, actually, how I can build a community. And I think that we need coherence to build the community. And that's why we started to work with a system to create this coherence around the community. So thank you very much. I hope that all of the material was as clear as possible. If not, you can contact me anytime if you need more information about open badges, about micro certification, about experiences, for example, that were developed by teachers in their classrooms and all of that. We are trying to follow all of the experiences, to learn of these experiences and all of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luis, for the really exhaustive presentation. I think you really gave the teachers a clear view. But if you have some time to stay with us, we had some questions in the chat that it would be great if you could address.
Great.
So I'm gonna read them out loud for you if you agree, and then you can reply.
Perfect.
The first one is, what is the difference between delivering and endorsing the recognition?
Very important question because sometimes it's not very clear this. Imagine the educational robotic collection. So here what we did, it was centralized in our institution. So it was our institution that created these badges. In our institution that it was in charge of delivering these badges. So the issuer of these badges, it was our institution actually, and the receiver of the badges were teachers actually, because it was oriented for teachers, not for students, because it was in the training process. And then we needed the endorsement, and actually we encourage people to get endorsed, to ask for an endorsement, because you can have your badge and ask for an endorsement to anybody by mail. Actually, it's very simple in Open Badge Passport, because Badger doesn't have this functionality. And what people did, it was to ask for endorsement. For example, they asked Margarita Romero, that works on this subject, that is a researcher from the Côte d'Azur University, from the Lino Laboratory, and said, Margarita, I developed and this project, and actually I'm in linked with the framework that you created. Can you endorse my micro certification? And Margarita endorsed the micro certification, for example. Or you can ask institutions for an endorsement. For example, the INRIA organization was very interesting, because they created a project that it was called Class Code, and that it was related to this. So we can ask INRIA, and actually before asking them to get endorsed by the different actors that are working on this, we worked with them in the design of the Open Badges collection. We send it, all the collection, to INRIA, but we are in charge of the collection. So we are the issuer of the badges. But the other people is just there actually, and if they receive a demand of endorsement, you can just accept it or decline it. It will depend on the project that it was sent it to you. So we work with them for that. I don't know if the answer is clear or not. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand the difference.
Thank you very much, Liz, for answering this first question. And actually, another one we received is, I'm gonna read it. Are badges from private companies going to be official for European educational organizations? I have some doubts about badges from private companies being as official and serious as they should be. She said that, for instance, she has a Flipgrid badge credential. Is that going to be in a digital official wallet?
That's a difficult question about the recognition, because I think there are two parts, I think, in the question. The first one is the recognition part, because, for example, diplomas or certificates, it's just a piece of paper, actually, a certificate or a diploma. But what is important is what is behind of the diploma. It will be not the same thing, a diploma sent by me, just by me, and a diploma sent by the MIT Media Lab, for example. It will be the power of the diploma, and the strong the recognition thing of the diploma, it will be different, so in a different level. That's why I was talking about the community, because like that I can use this with different communities. If, for example, we start to work with lifelong learning process, but we had another project that the idea is to connect high school students with companies. But if the companies are not in the ecosystem, they will not recognize this kind of artifacts. So when designing this experience, we have to connect the different actors, and that at a macro level is a very challenging thing. And the other thing is about private companies. Private companies right now are working a lot around with this technology, and there is a platform that I didn't present here, because it's a platform that I think is mostly used, and I tried to understand a couple of modes ago why is widely used by companies like Apple, like Microsoft, like Google, etc., but like Miro, if you know the whiteboard, the online whiteboard, is Credly. And actually, Credly concentrated their efforts on working with companies, internally with companies, so they can have their system that is linked with different skills that the company needs, actually. So they started to work with this. But then, in this context, the recognition process of the ecosystem is the company. But some companies like Miro started to deliver these artifacts outside, actually. For example, you can earn a badge to be a facilitator in Miro, and you are like a recognized, like I know how to facilitate a process using Miro. So they started, some companies, they started to open this to the public, actually. And the recognition is more the company, but the recognition is the community, and that's the difficult part. That's why I tell all the time the people that are designing these experiences to think about the ecosystem first. Actually, if it's your classroom, great, because the recognition is there. If it's your school, great, is you have the recognition. Because another example is a teacher from Paris, for example, that worked with this with badges in his classroom. The thing is that his colleagues didn't recognize the process, so actually everything was recognized in the classroom, and he tried to make it recognizable in the school, but it didn't work because the other teachers were not in there, etc., etc. Probably they didn't like the specific idea of the teacher, I don't know. But that's the important thing of building a community, actually, of recognition. And it is a huge challenge, and especially when we work at a macro level, like Europe, for example.
Indeed, thank you. Thank you very much, Louis. Before we are moving towards the end of this webinar, but before we close, I would like to kindly ask the participants to save the link that my colleagues Nikos just posted in the chat, because we would like a feedback from you. And if you have not done it yet, please also sign in to have this webinar registered in your portfolio. Okay, I think that's it, and we can move towards the closing. It was really a pleasure for us on the behalf of the eTwinning team to have you here with us today, Louis. Thank you very much for your interesting and useful presentation. There are a lot of positive reactions in the chat for you.
Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you, all the participants. Thank you for your comments and your question, and for attending the event today. Before I officially close, I would like to give you the floor, Louis, for one last word, and to maybe say something to the audience, a final comment, a final suggestion.
The final suggestion probably will be to start small. I think it's interesting. Not long ago, I worked with teachers from a ministry of Europe, and actually, I wanted to know how they could apply the potential of this technology at their level, actually, to start. And actually, they started to give me a lot of examples about how we can do different kind of things. It was very rich, and I think that's very interesting. And it's interesting to start to connect with other people that are putting in place similar initiatives at a micro level. I think is very interesting to follow these initiatives at a micro level. So I think start small and then start to connect bigger and bigger. And I think that will give us the word that is here in my screen, the community. But the community could be very small. It could be just 10 people, actually. But you can, it's interesting to start small and then start to expand bigger and bigger. And if you have any question, don't hesitate to contact me, or if you need a platform or a contact or things like that. If you want to start a project, don't hesitate to contact, to get in touch.
Thank you for your availability. Okay, I would like to wish you all a good evening. Thank you very much for staying with us for this hour, and please stay safe. Bye bye, everyone. Have a nice evening.